Tanse, hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, however you're listening to this podcast. Thank you for supporting the work that we do. The UDRcast is a full-time job, takes a lot of work. I have a lot of people helping me, supporting me behind the scenes, and basically really trying to support the people who listen to it. I do the UDRcast out of the passion of my heart, and sometimes, it gets hard to make it happen. But we as a team try to join forces and get the content out. So I'm just asking you from my heart if you have an opportunity to maybe help support the podcast through donations, a cup of coffee a month, a cup of coffees a month. Check out my Patreon account. We're accepting subscribers and donations there. Also, if you want to click onto my website, BILLWARDLIFE, there's a button there, it takes you to the Patreon. And, if we're helping you or your family or understanding, just think about giving us a hand up so we can keep creating great content. And if you have any suggestions on what you might want us to talk about, leave it in the comments on the website. Thank you. Hi. Welcome to the UDRcast, coming to you live from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. My studio.
In the studio.
Hey, I haven't even introduced you yet.
That's okay. I can pipe up. Recovery capital. Hey, that's why I moved here. You told me that and I believed you, and here we are.
Well, with no further ado, here is Janine H, my good friend. We're here to discuss all things recovery and parenting and family. That's our new series, and you're the first guest on the new series.
Oh, no way. Okay.
You are.
All right.
So, how are you?
I'm doing well. This has been a long time coming that we're back here with the microphones, and I've been looking forward to it.
Good. Mm-hmm. What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? Working, parenting, being a dog owner. Christmas was good. It was not like I planned. I had planned to. This first year that I took Christmas off, swapped it with a coworker. He offered.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, okay. He's like, since you have kids and stuff. And I was like, yeah. Historically, I've not been in Calgary, and like my son's dad is in Medicine Hat, so it's more complicated. And I thought I will book it off and then plan ahead. God's laughing with those plans, because then all of a sudden my dad and Donna, my stepmom, came down and we were going around everybody else's plans. And then I ended up by myself at Christmas, and it was, me and the dogs. And it was pretty good. I had a good time pre-Christmas. And then it was nice to have a quiet household and kind of decompress and spend some time with some family, made some phone calls.
Nice.
It was good. And that was also like...
You didn't call me.
I know. I said I called friends. No, I think I talked to you that day for real. I did. And I talk to you all the time. These were like phone calls that I was reaching out across like the ocean, Vancouver Island. And I spoke to my aunt. I told her that I got my hands on some slides that my grandma had left behind. And these slides went from like 1958 to, I don't even know when they stopped, but each slide, the box, so these are like the old school pictures. And on the box of the ones in the 80s, it said $9.99. I was like, holy shit, that's like expensive. That would translate to, I don't know, $100, $150. So this is like, it could break your marriage hobby. You got to be like asking permission. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, they were just like middle class and maybe didn't even have that kind of money, but she had a camera on her hand all the time. And so I thought about, like, as I'm viewing these slides, how intentional every photo was, And I spent maybe, 2 hours that day looking over the slides. And it was really interesting when I had that perspective of, like, every photo was so intentional. And I wonder what about this moment was so important to her. Some of them were obvious, but some not so much. And my aunt was on the slides quite a bit, and I thought I'm going to call her up and say hello. I hadn't talked to her in maybe a year and a half. So we had a good conversation and yeah, a little trip down memory lane. I'm not sure what to do with those slides, but
Big difference compared to today when every photo is not intentional and we're
exactly.
just snapping them for no good reason.
Exactly. And I think like it changed the way that I was viewing it because it wasn't so taken for granted and it was very much on purpose and I care about the person who was taking them too. So yeah, it also changed the way that I look at what was captured in the slides. But they cost $1.50 per slide to put onto digital. So they're probably going to stay like that for a bit because there's hundreds.
Interesting. Your grandma, she's pretty close in your life still, even though she's gone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, you always talk about her.
Yeah. I
How
do.
come?
I guess because, well, my daughter, Acadia, is in Calgary, and my grandma was like kind of raised us. And for me, it was because my dad was having his relationship troubles, and I would go to my grandma. And so I spent like grade 12 with her and grade 7 with her. And she was always around, and she was really Christian, like traumatizing Christian. And she you could tell that she had good intentions, right? But she always had these lessons, and we'd drive to church and we'd be singing Bible verses, little kids singing Bible verses and stuff. And Acadia, she was kind of raised that same way, but not such a traumatic Christian experience. It was more like she mellowed out. So Acadia didn't have like the you're going to burn in hell experience. She had more of like love everybody, be kind to your enemies, that sort of thing. So I also watched my grandma change, and I pretty much I really relied on her raising my kids to allow me to go to school and stuff. So I would say that we co-parented.
Mm-hmm.
And she meant a lot to me because she taught me these lessons that are actually more profound now that I'm sober. Like the Bible verses that were really annoying. They have sort of come to life in recovery because they say recovery things. And when I was able to move the Bible out of the way and just take the meaning of what was being said and trying to be like conveyed and taught through it, it helped with my religious trauma. And so a lot of the things that she taught are coming to life now for me. And so that's one of the things where I'm always having like, I see why she was talking about that, or, oh, that makes sense. So I have a lot of like little epiphanies. And Katie and I think it's been a lot of how we've moved through the grief is by talking about her. And I guess I just think she's around somewhere somehow, and I can access her just like I did when she was still alive. You know, when I think of you're just a phone call away, well, you're just like kind of a memory away. And if I tell myself that, then it kind of feels that way. And I don't know. So I just kind of keep her alive that way. And
so you said that your grandma kind of raised you?
yeah, like she was the stable one. I would be going around with my parents divorced when I was 6. And then I moved with my dad when I was 8, and then I stayed with him. And he didn't talk too much. He still doesn't talk too much. But he's quiet, and he went through a lot of like relationship stuff, like marriage, divorce, which resulted in a lot of moving. I was an only child, and I could always feel that he loved me a lot, but he never talked anything through. So as a result of like having no one to talk to, I had no emotional foundation for later in life. And my grandma, when I think of stability, she was the place I went when things would fall apart, and I would go live with her for some time while my dad would put his life back together, whatever that looked like.
Where was mom?
Mom had moved to the island. We were from Medicine Hat, and when I moved to my dad in Calgary when I was 8, she moved to a little town called Duncan. It's a little bit outside
Drunken.
the city of totems, actually. And she lived just outside of Duncan, and it was really pretty. And
how come you didn't go and live with your mom?
Yeah, that question's quite complicated. I did unpack a little bit of that along the way, here and there, and I think I have as best of an answer as I'm gonna get. It was something like my grandma was closer, right? So we were in Calgary. It was grade 6. There was a stepmom. She was, I think, alcoholic, and I think she might have been in some type of blackout. And she had come home. There was a lot of violence. It was raining. I was hiding in the shed in the back, and the police came. And it was actually her parents that called the police from the States and came and took her away. And then my grandma came the next day. And so I went with my grandma to Medicine Hat, and I completed grade 7 there. And nobody talked to me about what had happened, and I didn't know what happened to that stepmom. Her name was Cindy. And then for grade 8, my grandma dropped me back off in Invermere, BC. And it was never talked about. So I was back with my dad, and my mom never was told. So I asked her, why didn't you come and get me? And she goes, nobody told me. So in a day and age of no social media and like there's no cell phones, and you're relying on either your ex-partner or the mother-in-law who didn't want me to go there, right? And I wasn't telling her because I didn't want, like, there was like a betrayal thing, I think, and my mom historically hasn't been able to do hard conversations. She's much better now since I've gotten sober, but she's very, very hard to, like, she'll bounce right out of it, like, oh, we're not talking about that, da da da, and it's hard. So I probably had a sense of that, and chose not to tell her. I don't know, but I know she didn't know. I was angry for a bit, but I have landed in a place of, like, all 3 of the adults in my life, like, wanted me to be there with them, and so I look at it that way, so I can let go of some of the anger.
So you didn't spend a lot of time with your mom as a kid?
No, I spent maybe Christmas and a month in the summer.
And most of it was spent with your dad, a little bit of it with your grandma, but your dad wasn't big on communication, so and you were an only child. Mm-hmm. Did you get doted over usually only childs get like tons of attention and almost over attentiveness? Mm-hmm. Did you get that, or?
Well, it's interesting because, like, I didn't because my dad worked a lot, and so we just lived actually over in Queensland, and then we moved a bit in Deer Run. But for grade 5 and 6 there, I would get up in the morning and he wouldn't be there. He would have left for work, and then I'd get myself ready for school, walk to school. I went to Queensland, and then after school I went to a Irish family, the day home. Then my dad would pick me up there about 6:30, and then I'd spend a bit of time with him. He wouldn't say too much. We would watch TV, and then we'd do it all again. So on the weekend, he would also work. So I was alone a lot of the time. Probably, like, I don't know if it would be like child and family services involvement, but it's not good. It wasn't good to just be by myself all the time. And it was my normal because it's single parent and he had to work. But he would do things like, I remember for grade 5, he sent this big, like, balloon, just like all these balloons. And then there was trolls, like those dolls. Each balloon had a troll dangling from it. And it was like quite a production. And I remember being embarrassed, but I was like, I just loved that he did that for me. And my mom was also pretty good at doing these special things. Like, she did a lot of treasure hunts, and I was always doing, like, activities. And my favorite Christmas, we opened these gifts early. I can't remember why. I think I had to fly out, but she let me open a couple presents early, and they were Babysitter Club books, and she had like 5 wrapped, and there was 4 of them. So I got 20 books, right? And I was just, like, so thrilled because I was collecting them. And I just spent, like, the days with her. I was just reading these books, and she would do special things. And so I felt like they cared for me, but the emotional attunement was just not there at all. And that's the thing I missed. Like, I understand that now, that you gotta be there emotionally, teaching kids to identify and process their emotions. And I used to think that was cheesy because I was uncomfortable with my emotions. And I would say I'm not the most comfortable person with like fluffy emotions, but I'm definitely better than I used to be. And I do understand that like I was not given the skills that I needed to move through life because, you know, like to think that we're going to be able to get through life without feeling our emotions is like, it's like so far from the reality of what goes on and not just addiction, but society in general. We live in this age where we're reaching outside of ourselves for anything to get us out of discomfort, however small that discomfort is, like boredom. You know, people can't sit and be bored, and so on a bigger level, on the whole playing field, I didn't have an emotional compass at all and no tools, and so I really tripped over the alcoholism because
So, kind of going back a bit, you knew your parents cared, but they didn't show it in the best way, right? And they didn't know how to really show it, I guess. Would we step out of it a little bit and say, like, you didn't maybe get the love and affection that you needed or wanted and didn't know that you didn't want because you never really experienced it? Although you know that they loved you and they cared, they maybe weren't the best at like showing that. And as you've learned, it's really important to like make the time to like get down on your knees and play with your kid and, you know, tell them that I love you and have interaction with them and, you know, talk about imagination and all these kind of things that really are expressions of like, I care and I love you, right? So you didn't get a lot of that.
Yeah, and I would say like that's all accurate. It was confusing because there was so many like acts of like I'm thinking of you, like for example, my mom built a dollhouse for me, built it from scratch, and she got like carpet samples and wallpaper samples, and it was like this profound memory for me because I'm like, why wasn't she there for me? Like, how could I remember just such this doting mom, but then like there's just no emotional connection, and only seeing her every once or twice a year, I wouldn't say that's a good indication either because we would be wrapped up in like activities and spending time together. And but she moved down in COVID right before I went into the whole debauchery of the last drunk. And anyway, she moved down and I hadn't lived near her or with her.
Moved down from where?
To Medicine Hat from the island. And she moved actually in with me after I had my youngest son. And so then I started seeing. So I've been really getting to know my mom since 2020 in a new way. And that's brought in some like clarity and some understanding. And what was lacking from her on that end was like I always sensed she disapproved. And she's hard to please. And so it would be mixed messages that were quite confusing. And I would say probably hard on my like self-worth. Was like, I love you, but I love you if you dress like this or don't say that or whatever she wanted from me. And it was hard to truly please her. And she had like high expectations and probably wasn't even aware of them. And yeah, so I think I was just confused with, you know, she's doing these acts of things, but yet I feel like there's something wrong with me, was the feeling, like shame. And with my dad, I always felt safe and I felt loved, but he never communicated. So we would go through these like huge life transitions. We're changing schools, we're changing towns, we're upside down. And we wouldn't be talking about it. And I never thought anything of that. And I actually didn't think anything of that until the last few years where I'm like, man, that would have really caused some emotional turmoil. I think the first time that we sat down to talk like this, I talked about my panic attacks. And I believe like that's what caused the panic attacks is there was so many years of suppressed shit that I wasn't even aware of because that's just how we lived. And now in my job, like I work in urgent care and I see a lot of panic attacks come in, and I always ask, because of my own experience, I say, are you someone who suppresses things or do you talk about them? I'm just waiting for somebody to say, no, I talk about things, and I've never come across it. And so I tell people, I'm like, I used to have panic attacks, and it didn't take more than 2 times I saw a psychologist, and I just got enough off to alleviate the pressure, and I didn't have panic attacks again. And it seems like it doesn't take much to alleviate some of the pressure. There's a little bit more than that, but just getting some of the things out, because when we're talking, the emotion part and the logical part, they work together to process an experience and to give it meaning. And so I was never doing that. And I saw with my kids going through things, just whatever things, they would talk about it, and I'd hear them talk about their day and their friends, and if they were mad at me or if they needed help cleaning their room because I needed it clean and mom's ridiculous, and they would just talk out their stuff. And there's a lot of value to that, like having a sibling that you're able to do that with. And they grew up really close, and they talked to each other about everything. And they're old enough now, like Acadia's 20 and Jericho's 17, that they're able to reflect on things a bit. So I'll ask them, like, what do you think worked well, and what didn't work well when you were being raised? And they're able to give me feedback on that. And so I did ask about the sibling thing and the conversing together and if that was helpful. And they were both like, well, it wasn't unhelpful, but we don't know any different. So it was kind of, they weren't able to give me a clear answer on that. But there are some things that they've given me really good feedback about the parenting stuff. And yeah, so I would say that talking and playing with the kids is one thing, but it's more about communicating like unconditional love, as well as being there to process when there's something to process, and not sweeping it under the carpet.
Mm-hmm. So kind of going back, you said I tripped over my alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And so as you were kind of walking through your life in somewhat normal-ish looking, but under the layers it's somewhat dysfunctional, I guess. And like the reason why I brought up like you didn't maybe get the love that you needed or wanted, that's one of the biggest things of alcoholics, and that usually as children they didn't get something.
Yeah.
And doing enough step 5s, you get to see these things, right? And you got it together, right? You're a pretty together type of person that seems like you might have had everything done right as being raised. But as we uncover your story, there's these things that are actually glaring that are very important to you tripping over alcoholism. It's not like you're tripping over it. It's like almost like a destiny that's the way it's going to go, because that's the way it goes from my experiences working with people, right? So as we kind of walk through your story, how did you get to drinking, and how did you cross the line?
So this is like, tell me what you think of this. So one of the things that they believe is that prevention is education. So basically, if you teach about something and you talk about, this is what this looks like, these are the warning signs, this is kind of like what to watch out for and where to go for help if you see it. And so in the education, you can bring prevention. So I think that if my mom would have told me, I went to a family reunion recently, right? And there's a lot of alcoholism. There's a lot of mental health stuff. And I was never told that. And my mom was actually just learning some of it herself as well. And so I do believe that there would have been an effect. There would have been a change in my story somehow. I don't think I could have avoided all of it. I don't know. But I know for sure that I had no idea where the alcoholism came from. So when I was drinking different, I would watch everybody else and they weren't having that experience. They weren't blacking out. They weren't puking. Some would just have a couple coolers, and I was drinking horrendously and like alcoholically from the very first time I drank when I was 15. And so if I would have had the storyline of, there's a lot of alcoholism in your family, this is what this looks like, these are the signs, I know it would have changed the fact that I could have labeled it sooner, because I didn't find out no one told me that you could be an alcoholic when you were barely of drinking age. I didn't know it went like that. I wasn't ever thinking that. And somebody told me about Alcoholics Anonymous when I was like 22 or so. And I was like, no way. And they said that blackouts are alcoholic. Like, normal drinkers don't black out. And I was horrified, because I was thinking everybody blacks out at closing time. So all the stupid shit that I did that was embarrassing was like forgotten about. So that was like the first thing I thought was, oh my God, lots of people remember, holy fuck. But that I could be alcoholic. And that was the first time I heard that. And so the result of that is somebody who's drinking, trying to change what they're doing to match what everyone else their age is doing. And I know for sure that was unnecessary, that at least I could have had a label on it and then could I have pulled it back? Maybe. Like, I don't know. I don't know how it would have changed the story, but given the fact that my childhood was like lonely and confusing and did not arm me with any emotional tools, I don't think I could have evaded alcoholism alone just by knowing that it ran in my family. But it's one of the factors that comes together to create the whole picture.
Yeah. Maybe unfortunate that you didn't have the fair warning, but in the same breath, it's been my experiences, even with fair warning, it doesn't really change that path of an alcoholic. Typically, it doesn't, right? And chances are it wouldn't have. And like in our literature, I'll bring the literature in, you might have known, but at the time that you knew, it didn't really matter anyway, because you got enjoyment out of it and you hadn't crossed the line. Or maybe you had crossed the line, but it hadn't caused enough darkness or unmanageability in your life at that point yet. And so chances
you
are
actually bring up a really good point with that, because like going back to the literature, like we're drinking essentially because we like what it's doing, and what it was doing was allowing me to be around people and to be myself. But like to be able to socialize, because I didn't have that skill either, because I had moved and moved and moved and moved. And every time I was a new student in a new school, I went to a new school every year, except Queensland. I went to it one in a row, grade 5 and grade 6. But every other school, it was a new school every year, sometimes 2 in a year. And so there was a wall that was put up, because I was always the new kid, and it was always like, you defend yourself against kids because they're assholes in certain years. And so I developed an armor to guard me from that. And that made me unapproachable, or that made me feel like I'm on the sidelines, or that I didn't know how to connect or relate. And I was just different, and alcohol removed that. And then I was belonging, and there was none of that worry, and I was them, and I was having this experience where I belong, and here's my friends, and we're all having fun, and there was nothing different between me and everyone else.
Another thing you said that is a pure symptom, as far as like the work that I've done with people, is like kids that move around a lot, like Army brat parents, like the parents who have Army brat kids, and they're constantly moving all over the country. And, I can't even count how many times I've noticed that a person that moves around a lot and never is able to build like friendships, emotional bonds, and probably not only with people, but with like their environment in general. You're not staying in the same bedroom. You're not staying in the same house. Nothing is familiar, and you can't you can't build a relationship with anything. And these are big symptoms of people that I've worked with that end up being, substance abuse users. So that's another wild thing there.
Yeah, what you're actually talking about is like risk and protective factors. And so like a protective factor is to belong to a community and to belong to a school. And I understand that like pretty deeply, because I think that a lot of like I dropped out in grade 10, and I was out of school for a couple of years, and then I went back to college, and I didn't graduate. Like I had to do like a mature student, and it was this whole rigmarole because academically things were just piling up, and I think that I wasn't given the chance to have the right support because I was always the new kid and there was no baseline ever. And then if there was a baseline starting to be established, I would move. And so belonging to a school is important for the right supports to be put in place for learning. And it's like you get a lot of self-esteem by having the same friends and belonging to those friends. There's opportunities to navigate conflict and then become friends again. And I think most importantly of what you were just talking about there, when the home life is in disarray, like even organization, having an organized home versus not an organized home, a child, if you're like, say Maze, right? I like to have things organized for him because I learned this, and it makes tons of sense that if he's always looking for his mittens, he's not going to learn how to like live in his emotional world and to like process stuff properly because he's always in chaos looking, and that takes attention. So you can't actually like get to the next level of like development when you're in chaos all the time and everything is like, where's this? Where's that? What are we doing? Where are we going? And that's what it becomes, instead of, developing emotional stages and getting an opportunity to like know and understand yourself. You're just always worried about what's happening next. And it becomes, what are we doing now? And where, and I kept like, talk about all those slides. I wouldn't say I'm a hoarder, but I really value like sentimental stuff. And I have like pictures from like, I have my report cards every year through elementary school. I have like 5 bins of just like school stuff. And I think that I held on to those things because it was like a proof of my identity, like that I was taking myself with me. And I could do that with like stuff. And so like I have my first piggy bank and I have the scrapbooks, I have so much stuff. And I'm glad I do, because I look at it and I have a ton of memory attached to it. But I do think the bottom line for all of that was like, I'm taking me with me. And like there was like an anxiety around the things that I kept. And babysitter club books, I still have like 350 in my laundry room underneath the cupboards because I kept everything. And I think that why wouldn't I? Because that was the only thing I could control and take, and it was proof of who I was and where I was, and that was in my control. And so I really empathize with like hoarding, because I think it's something like that, and that there's a lot of sentiment to it, which is why you can't just go in there and, hey, I'm just going to take all your stuff and take it away for you, because there's so much like of a person's like emotional world tied up to it in whatever way that it is. But yeah, so it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So then as you kind of coming into your teenage years and you're noticing alcohol is allowing you to connect and all those kinds of things, and very similar to myself, right? Just kind of in my story, I'm going to go back. Like my mom wasn't around, my dad wasn't around. I think the first semblance of real good communication where I did get validation was my grandma. And I was in like grade 2, and she was a rock, and everything was stable. Everything was the same. With my mom and my dad, when they were together, I just remember moving a bit, and then my mom wasn't around, and then I was just with my dad. And then the next thing I knew, I was with my grandma. But those 2 or 3 years with my grandma really solidified like some good things in my life that I really believe if I didn't have those 2 or 3 years with my grandma, I would have been a totally different person, because I never would have got even that amount of structure and love and validation. And even with the dog, Abner, we had a dog named Abner, like just that love and like being able, me and my brother, just be able to play and not, like you said, where's my mittens? Where's this? Where's that? And like earlier I talked about like building a relationship with your bedroom. Like somebody who's in chaos doesn't even have time to build a relationship with like their bed where it's like, this is my comfort zone, right? It's just a place where you sleep and you wake up to more chaos the next day. And typically a lot of those beds are chaotic as well. There's clothes all over them that's not made. And so you don't get to develop like any relationship with yourself. And I see what you're saying in that. And I really agree with that, right?
I love what you just said too, because it's like people don't get a sense of this is where I go for my own comfort and my own like self-soothing, and this is my safety place. You know, like, and people live like that, and you know, to some degree I lived like that and you lived like that, and our grandma's was one of the things that we connected with initially, and I forgot about that actually, and I was like, oh yeah, our grandmas. And yeah, and it was actually a pretty profound time, because that was like one of the things when you talked about your grandma, it was like it was a coincidence or a God shot, or however you want to say it. It was a breadcrumb in a certain direction for me. But what you're talking about there is something like a lighthouse. And, you know, like when I work with somebody who has not had an experience with a person who provided such safety, or, you know, even having a family meal at the table, you know, that can be a good indication of, I want to aim for that because I remember that and it felt good, and that's what I want to do for my family. Some people don't have a reference point. And so when they're trying to overcome addiction or mental health issues, it's like they're running and they're looking behind them like, I don't want that anymore. I don't know where I'm going, but I just don't want that. And so they're going in just a different direction, somewhat haphazardly, because they don't have that point on the map to run to. And that makes a really, really big difference when you're recovering from something, when you're going in a different direction. You know, like it's all about going into the unknown, but it's much easier to go into the unknown with a little bit of a map and a little bit of like a flashlight as to we're going to go in this direction, rather than we're just going to have a free-for-all in the forest, blindfolded.
Okay. Let's get to your drinking.
Okay.
Tell us.
Well, my drinking. So the first years were the worst because I didn't understand alcohol at all.
You're 15.
Yeah. So I've talked to my kids about, this is alcoholism, this is what it looks like, and also about like, this is the difference between a beer and drinking vodka. You know, that would have been helpful. And I figured that one out on my own, but it took a long time. And by the time you figure these things out on your own accord, you've caused yourself a lot of trauma. You know, you've sold yourself out 100 times already. And so by the time I was 20, I was like, who is this person? And, you know, like.
In what way?
Fighting, blacking out. I was really, really angry. I was angry for like Jekyll and Hyde to the extreme. And I would be full of rage. And so the next day people would be like, yeah, you were like this, or you fought this person, and I'm not physical fighting scared me. And I was just like, what was I doing? And why was I saying that? And where does this come from? And then instead of going to like, oh, this is alcoholism, it's like, oh, this is the evil spirits. This is like my grandma's version is like you're drinking evil spirits and they possess you. And so it's like there's like extremes of what I was thinking, right? Like you're possessed by the spirits and I'm just a really bad person who doesn't know, you know, I'm fake when I'm sober. Like I didn't know what was going on, and it corrodes your self-worth when you are acting out of your integrity. And I don't think any human being on this planet wants to just hurt and harm and lash out, and especially not for no reason. And so it was really confusing, and it added to the confusion, and I was pretty lost, and I couldn't stop blacking out, and I found cocaine, and I was like, this is the solution. I hear this all the time. This is the solution so I don't black out again. And that ended me up in treatment. And then I was just at the 28-day treatment center, which, you just have enough time to think straight for maybe 3 days and then you're out again. And I remember learning about triggers, actually, and I hate that word, but I learned something that I found in a box when I was moving, and it said, your triggers are rap music, feeling good, and physical pain. And that's actually helped me because it's true. It's like when I'm feeling good, I used to take it all down because I had room. I had room to make lots of mistakes because everything was in order. And that was kind of like how my drinking was I'd build it up and tear it down. Our book talks about that. But anyways, I came across the table with this addiction counselor, and she was telling me that alcohol is my problem. And I was like, alcohol's not my problem. I'm defending it to the death, because you're not going to take that away from me. And I said, cocaine's my problem. And she's like, alcohol's your problem, and da-da-da. And I don't remember the rest of it, but I remember saying, how did you get this job? And she told me how she got her job. And so I was like, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to tell this girl what my problem is. And she clearly doesn't know her job. And that's how it started. So I did what she said. Like, I looked it all up and I signed up for school. So I show up in the addictions program.
So you're going to show her. So you went down this path out of resentment.
Yeah. And so I signed up for school. So I had no real treatment. Like, I was only sober because I was pregnant. And that pregnancy, like, it was like planned so that I could get sober because I could not figure out how to get sober. And
With Acadia?
Jericho. Mm-hmm. And I knew I could get sober if I was pregnant, and I hoped I could figure it out while I was sober. And so I thought I did. Jericho's father and I, we were together. We bought a house. We were doing all the things. I was going to school. He was doing his journeyman thing. He's not an addict, and he was able to pull it together pretty good. And then he would go to Al-Anon, and he would talk about my alcoholic. That would really make me feel good. And so we had a interesting relationship, and there was a lot of codependency. And so I sign up for school and I show up on the first day, and I haven't done an ounce of work on myself. I just think being physically sober is the solution, and I'm good to go. And so the woman who put together that program, she was very, very direct and changed my life. And she did not put up with things. I don't know if she liked me or if she didn't like me, or she just told it how it was, and she changed my world. So that day she went over, this is what this program is. It's going to be 2 years of school. Then you're going to go and do a couple of practicums. And if you have a criminal record or if you have child and family service involvement, then that will show up when you do a child welfare check and when you need to provide, the paperwork to do your practicums. So if you have any issues with that, talk to me after class. So I'm like...
And this was first year university?
Yeah, first year at the Medicine Hat College.
After you ended up going and getting your grade 12 and all of these things?
Nope, I applied as a mature student.
Oh, so you didn't need to go and get a GED or anything?
Yeah, because I was 21. Older than 21 is like the mature student. So I had taken enough classes that I should have graduated, but I was at a Catholic school when I went back to school, and they wanted me to have all the Catholic classes. And so I just was like, I'm the Catholic religion. And I was like, no. And so that's why I didn't actually graduate, was because I didn't want to take religion 10, 11, 12. And I was like, what difference does it make anyways? And I was in the alcoholism. So I thought I was going to have to go back, and I did have to do some upgrading, but I did it through the college. But yeah, so after she says that, I go to her after class, and no insight. I cannot emphasize how not work that I did. I knew my triggers, and I was sober for not even a year. So it was I literally got out of that treatment center in December, and then the following September I started school. And there was just the pregnancy, and then I gave birth in July, and I was in school in September. And so, I can't even imagine how irritating I would have been, nails down a chalkboard. I'm telling you, I would have been I said, so, I had child and family service involvement, and it was really no big deal because, I just went to treatment, and then I got out of treatment, and everything's good. Something like that. And then I totally thought she would say, good for you. Good for you, because that's what most people would say. Good for you for going to treatment. Good for you for coming back to school, right? You'd get the good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, someone took away your right to mother. You need to look at that. And then off she goes. And I was like, I was so mad. Yeah. So that was the start of it. And and it was a wild ride for the next few years. I failed the first year. And academically, I'm pretty good at just, learning the thing and writing the test. And I was failing. And I was failing her addictions class. And I'd started drinking too, so that probably wasn't helpful. But she said to me that she stacks the program academically because she can't measure intrinsic work. So like it's the way that she says that you can see if someone's life's unmanageable, which is pretty genius. Like, and I was face planting. So I failed her class, and then she said, "You cannot come back until you've had a year of AA." And I was like, "But I'm sober." And I don't know how sober I was, maybe for the day, but I didn't see the need for Alcoholics Anonymous, that's for sure. And then she was like, "It's not about the alcohol." And so that was that. And she left again. And then so I had this choice of, am I going to do a year of AA, or am I going to come back and I'm going to show this lady? And that was the only way. So I did a year of AA. I went and found my friend who was a worse drinker than me. And I said, "I got to take you to AA." So I brought my friend to AA, and it was pretty good. Like I felt a sense of belonging there and connection, and it made sense. And for me at that time, it was like the stability, and it was the parenting, and so between Alcoholics Anonymous and what that teacher was doing, it grew me up, and it echoed the church stuff, and some of the church stuff I really thought was like important, right? But I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater all the time, and Alcoholics Anonymous was like, forgive, do that, and that was it. There wasn't a whole bunch of anything else attached to it. It was like, be a good human, and so I found that I could start to untangle some of my religious upbringing there, and I stayed sober actually for a few years, and I didn't do the steps. There was a lot of small town drama. The women in the rooms were like, it was a lot, and I didn't want what the person who was wanting to take me through the steps. It was like kind of a cultish experience. And so I didn't do the steps because there was some of it that was like odd, but it was always there when I wanted to go and connect. And I always heard something that was helpful that I could apply to my life. And the year flew by, and there was a roundup, and my son's dad, who was going to Al-Anon, and myself actually did the newcomers panel, and we spoke together for that. And I really did love the program, and I separated from it because during my practicum, I did my first one at a treatment center that was 12-step.
So you came back to school.
Yeah.
I spent your year.
Finished it. I finished the program.
And you passed.
And I passed.
And so your teacher was impressed with your newfound
the teacher
resilience?
She's a hard one to read. I think only like 4 people graduated from out of like 28 or whatever. She had a very high fail rate because you had to really do the work, and I did. And like, she supported me with the parenting. Like, she brought to light a lot of the things that like were going to affect me or the kids or both in the end. So some discipline stuff she brought up. And there was classes that just through the curriculum helped me to parent, because I like risk and protective factors, like we talked about. That was taught pretty extensively, actually. So I learned how to like.
But the courses weren't parenting courses. This was about psychology and addiction.
It was so the classes that were helpful were like the counseling classes were very helpful because I learned how to like listen and to listen for what I needed to be listening for to help and to understand someone. And the prevention class, that one talked about how do you prevent addiction, how do you prevent like community illness in general, and those had things that translated directly to parenting for sure. And then Colleen was there to add what she saw, and I really admired her, and like I thought that I still think that she put together such a brilliant program, and like the people that graduated from it like really got a lot out of it, and it really made all the other things I did vocationally afterwards, like it just never hit the mark. And so over the years, I've become more fond of her in my heart. But did she like me, or was she proud of me? I'm sure she must have been because she graduated me. But she was a tough one. She was not in it to, like, it was more about the facts than the feelings, for sure. But yeah, it was. We fought actually towards the end of my practicum because I didn't want to leave Medicine Hat. And she said, you have to go to Calgary. And so I went to the dean and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I have 2 young kids. And she had said to me, women with more kids go further than you. And that was that, right? No, so I was so mad. So I had to come to Calgary. But what she was doing was I was scared to drive on the highway by myself. I was scared of the city. I was scared of a lot of things. So she was exposing me to those things. And so going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, is I did my 12-step treatment center. It was my first practicum. And then I did a government practicum, and it wasn't 12-step. So then all of a sudden I was getting, oh, you can moderate and you can do, and I disconnected from all of that. And over time I was, like a good alcoholic, I was rewriting the narrative, and it wasn't so bad. And I was still young. I was like maybe 25 or 26. I don't know. I was young, and maybe it wasn't so bad. And maybe I quit for long enough time, and maybe I have the tools now. And then it was really tricky because I did start drinking on and off actually until the big blowout. I drank on and off, and I would always dial it back. And it never got as bad as it did at the beginning because I had those tools. So it kind of prolonged the bottom in a sense. Like it was interesting, but I convinced myself that I had like healed a little bit, and now I wasn't angry, and now I didn't black out as much because I didn't drink 40% vodka. So I really had a lot of justifications to convince myself that it wasn't so bad. And it never did look as bad as the beginning, but it also looked way worse, like it just morphed into something different. And once those big things, because I did do so much work, counseling, like I had to we had to see a counselor through that whole time. That was one of the requirements as well of that program. And so I was navigating a lot of things on the inside, but like I wasn't actually doing the work that was going to sustain meaningful change. And and that eluded me until I got to Calgary and until
you got to Calgary the second time.
Yeah, this last
years
time.
later.
Years later.
Wild. We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARDLIFE and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast. Okay. Well, let's just quickly fast forward because I do want to get into some parenting talk. So fast forward to your last bunch of relapses. Although it's very important for our listeners to know that you have collected a lot of data over the years of relapsing. A lot of it came through Colleen in school and how she presented certain philosophies that didn't fully make sense at the time. And some of the Bible verses and some of your grandmother's teachings, which, they were the Bible, but later they started opening up and having deeper meaning, which somewhat aligned with Colleen's philosophies. And so anyway, as we kind of bring all of that learning forward and your schooling, and you got many years of schooling in there, and then you come here and you're fully degreed and mastered, and now you're in treatment again, right?
At the place that I did my practicum. Came full circle. Not the good way. But so I guess just to touch on the parenting thing, I was lucky that I came across like her and the education that I did, because I would not have been able. It's not easy. There's no it's a hard thing to figure out how you're supposed to parent, and I wouldn't have been able to come up on it on my own. So I'm lucky, and people get really hard on themselves with their parenting, and it's not something that people just know, especially coming from a childhood that you weren't taught. Like, people just are trying to do the better than what was happening for them. And so I just want to say that, because the stuff that I fell into, that I was able to kind of prolong the bottom. Like my son, when I went into the last drink, the fall apart in 2020, my middle son didn't even know I had an alcohol problem. He'd never seen me drink. He didn't. So I was able to dial it back and hide. And there was a lot of times that like I say to him, remember this? Do you remember this? And he's kind of like, oh, but I was able to control it until I couldn't. Right. And so, my oldest daughter, she saw a lot of it. And so that really hurt our relationship, because it was like I was a hypocrite, and she knew that I was not walking the walk, and that I had everybody fooled, let's say, except for her. And it caused a lot of resentment, and she didn't understand like why I was making the choices that I was, and within my relationship that I was in. And so there was a lot of work to be done there. And I would say also, because my middle son didn't know, there was a lot of work to be done there as well, because I caused some problems with those two, because she resented him because he didn't get exposed to certain things, and he wouldn't believe her. And I put her in a position that she would try to talk to him back to the sibling stuff, and he would defend me, and which would just aggravate her even more, right? So it wasn't just this I'm getting away with it scotch-free. Like, I had a lot of things I had to go back, and they were subtle things that I don't know if I would have known to look for if I didn't have the training that I do. And so anyways, I went to this treatment center, and is that what you wanted me to talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I went to the treatment center that I did the internship with, and I was just kind of hiding out. And I thought that I had done all of the recovery stuff. Like, I thought like there was something really super wrong with me, that I wasn't understanding how to stay sober. And I had somewhat given up hope on being able to get sober, because I thought I had done the steps. I had over the years like gotten a sponsor, and I'd done some Al-Anon steps even, but it was like really rushed, step 6, 7, 8, 9. And there was really no 10, 11, 12 talk. There was 12, but the 10 wasn't emphasized, right? And those were the things that I learned that I missed. And the steps, like...
Hold on.
Yeah.
As an intellectual, learning everything you learned, also probably having your pride involved, going, I've learned all this, I should know all this, and trying to implement all of the strategies that you did use through education, and then them not working eventually took you to a place where you're like, fuck, I'm back in treatment again. But with all of the head knowledge, and here you are still doing the steps. did you think that, okay, well, I figured that I had it kind of licked with my education, but obviously I'm not licking it because here's where I'm at. Did your mind stay open to do the steps because what you had been doing isn't working? And did you see what you had learned not really the path to sobriety?
So I was really angry with the mental health system. By the time I got to treatment, I had been in the hospital. The hospital was actually like a holding place while I waited to go to treatment. And I was happy to be there because I was like not well and I was really sick of my family. And there was just so much going on. But I was really shocked at what was missing. Like it's not easy to get into treatment and it's not easy to get the care when you need the care, and that was shocking. And working on the other side of it, I knew like that our system was lacking, but when I went through the whole gamut of services and like from hospitals to I went through the whole shebang, and I was shocked at how hard it is to get help, and then the help that sometimes you get isn't helpful. And so like when I got to treatment, I knew I missed something because the research says that, like if you do XYZ, you will get XYZ. And so I was willing to kind of open my mind up that I might have missed something. I didn't think it was in the steps, but I was willing to try because of a counselor actually that talked to me and just kind of said, all I did was the steps, if you can smash everything. And I was at a place that I was perfectly happy, if not relieved, to smash everything, because it was all just a sandstorm in my head of like, what works, what doesn't. I had seen things in my career that worked really well. There was pieces that worked, but I couldn't figure it out how to put it all together. And so I just was like, Kate, and I would walk by her and I would start saying like, well, what about, and I would talk about like a theory or some type of like, what about this? And she would just go smash. And I'd be like, okay. And I'd literally like smash everything, And so I thought, okay, if I did miss something, I want to make sure that I catch it this time. And if it's not within the 12 steps, then at least I know, because how I did it before, I knew that I could have easily missed something. And so when I got out of treatment there, I couldn't talk past step 6. And so I was looking for what was step 6. And I was in between Calgary and Medicine Hat at the time. I hadn't made the move up yet, hadn't met you yet, but I was about to. And I saw you at a meeting, and my friend spoke first at that meeting, and he talked about character defects. And at the time, I only thought I had the 2. And so I was listening to him say, you have a lot more defects than you know. You just don't know because you've lived there, and that's your comfort zone. And so I heard that, and then you closed the meeting that day, and you talked about just like it. I've told you this before, but you sounded like a message from my grandma with just a ton of swearing. And so I really heard you. And then I went back to Medicine Hat, and somebody told me about the podcast, and like I wouldn't have. And then that was how I began actually recovering, was through the podcast. And then I got in touch with you, and then we started talking, and you had a lot of the same things that Colleen was teaching, like Dave Hawkins and letting go and power versus force. And she taught that stuff, and it made no sense at the time, but I was like, how did you get to this? And you said, I don't know, I've just been like on this spiritual journey, and this is where it led. And I'm certain that's how she came to that as well. And there was just like so much, like a sense of like familiar, and like I just had, I was convinced that if I listened to you, that I would be able to, at the time, do what you did, which was kind of leave your old life and do something new, and the timing that you would send me things. And so I just followed that. And you taught me how to like lean into my intuition and what I was missing now, like in just a very simple simple way of saying this is everything that I do, I go into the fear and discomfort. And like I have hard conversations and I like take these risks that I wouldn't take, like holding on to that job, right? Like I was holding on and holding out, and I did not cave on what I was like thinking I needed to do for that, and it was looking pretty iffy, and it worked out at the last minute, But I've just really, ever since I met you, and you like I jumped out of the plane. I had to leave my whole life, my job, my house, like all the things, my kids even behind, to come to Calgary, and I knew I had to get recovery first before I could do anything else. And so I really dove into that, and it looked like I was missing the fear the whole time, was that I was not doing the things I was scared of. I wasn't even identifying that I was scared of them. And so the way out has been that I'm doing the discomfort things, and I'm doing the things that are hard, and I'm doing the things that are, and I've been pretty, I would say, like ruthless in that way. Like I haven't held back in any area at any point at any time yet. And I just like keep going into like what's hard. It's got to be, like your fear is on the limit, or your limitations are on the other side of your fear, or however that is. I just botched it, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And that one that got me out of medicine at was like, if you want to take the island, you got to burn the boats. And so I've just been kind of running my life like that, is like going into the things that make me uncomfortable, and I'm just convinced now that that's where I need to be, because that's what like pushes me into like the next growth, and like I can become, because we're not meant to be, in fear, and we're not effective when we're in fear. And so the solution became like so obvious, and yet it was never obvious. So going back to, did I think mental health was this, that, or the other thing? I didn't know. I didn't know what I was missing, and I knew that there was something that I was missing, and I was pretty sure that it wasn't in mental health by the time I got to the treatment center. And so now today, like I do what I can in the mental health world, but it's become more effective for me because I have the framework of
12 step.
Yeah. And so that has allowed me to discern, okay, that was helpful. Like one of the things that was really helpful was Connect Parent Program when I trained as a facilitator for that. And it was like every single group we ran, it was life-changing. And now I see why that is, because it incorporates so much of the principles of the program, right? And so all the things that I was like, okay, well, there's this and this that's good, but the rest of the, and I see now like the things that call people out into themselves instead of blaming. And instead, there's a lot of like blaming and like, oh, that must be so hard, and that's important. And it's like, it's good to recognize that somebody's going through a hard time, but it should always be like, how are you contributing to your problem? And that's not always the message, right? And that's not always what a person hears. And that has to be, because like what our book says is that's the keys to the kingdom. It starts here. This is like why we're doing an inventory at all. And most people, they stop and they stay sore. And that stuck out to me. And it's like, well, why are they staying sore? They're staying sore because they're not changing. So they're going out. I was going out into the next relationship and the next relationship and the next relationship. And I was situations. I was not changing. So I'm staying sore because I'm showing up in all these different ways, but I'm showing up the same. And then I'm getting the same result. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even that I'm staying sore, stuck in resentment of one particular resentment. I'm staying sore because the whole damn world's against me, because I'm the problem and I'm not seeing it. And so like that was a big turning point too for me, is like this is the stuff that we got to do, is look at ourselves only. And I don't know if I was ever at a place to do that with some of the resentments that I held. Mm-hmm. It was like, yeah, I can see, just like the book says, I can see that I'm kind of to blame, but it's mostly their fault. And that kept me stuck too.
Mm-hmm. So when we kind of flipped this over, as you moved over to Calgary, left Maze behind, Acadia's back there. Jericho is living
with his dad.
With his dad somewhere else. And so now we're talking a couple of years now, and you've really integrated Maze now lives with you. You have 50-50 custody with Tyler in Medicine Hat, and you and Tyler have a decent
Such a good relationship. Yeah.
parenting relationships, where it wasn't like that when you first got here. There was a lot of turmoil in there. You know, you and your mom, I didn't realize to the degree that you guys were disconnected for a good chunk of your life. I didn't really understand that you and her are really rebuilding, or not even rebuilding, building a new relationship with each other since you've been here. And, you know, with Acadia, you know, there was some animosity at first back in those early days, and you guys have really sorted those things out. What has it taken to get to this place where you and your kids can communicate? And I know that it's not all, you know, perfect all the time, because it never can be, and you guys have had your struggles, you and Acadia, you know, recently, and, you know, but how do you make it work now? What is the main catalyst to being able to build these relationships and make the time and the key components to the communication that seems to be working with Tyler, your mom, and your kids?
So with the adults in my life, like including like my in-law, who I've like come to genuinely love, and we had a hard time there, is just seeking to understand. I would say that's the principle that has gotten me the biggest bang for my buck. With Acadia, grandma passed while I was in treatment, and that derailed a lot of Acadia's plans as well. She had just graduated, and her plan was to stay in Medicine Hat. Jericho, the plan was always he was going to finish high school there. Maze was a wild card, and I don't know. Acadia has been time. I think time would be the answer, I would say, for that, and not having an expectation that this is going to happen overnight, and that just because I got sober, everything's going to go away, and just because I got sober, that anybody is going to go, good for you. Because sometimes they go, great, now you're functioning like a normal person should, like, that's it. And so the family work in a clinical sense, it takes a long time. And so I had an understanding that it was going to take a long time, because not only is it not just a counseling problem, it's an addiction that has like really affected her life. And the amends process was in pieces, and it was like a little bit here. We would rebuild some trust, because going into the whole thing with her would have been like actually harmful. We weren't at a place, like I think of it as like emotional deposits in the bank account. And I think like mental health and especially the counseling world of mental health, it gives this idea that you have to talk it through. And that's true, except you can't talk it through if you're emotionally empty. Like if your bank account isn't, if it's in a deficit, you're gonna have a harsh startup. You're gonna have like contempt. You're gonna have criticism. You're gonna have like, there's not a trusting, positive view that we're viewing each other. So things are gonna be slanted and misinterpreted, and the communication is gonna be really, really messy. So I guess in applying that same principle, like of an emotional bank account, that comes out of marriage counseling, actually. But it's the same for all relationships. And I really used that for Acadia. And I focused more on like time spent and like positive interactions without talking about the heavy stuff, because she was used to that. She was used to like, let's talk it through, and like, how are you doing? And me explaining myself. And it was never really proven, because I would get drunk again. And I had to like pull back on the talking, and I had to just let my actions, speak. And I had to like accept the fact that there was times when it wasn't received in the way that I wanted it to be received or hoped that it would, and that I didn't feel like I wanted so much to feel so close to her. But in some ways she was not accessible. And so I had to really just like not take that personally and lean into God and into what I know about reconstructing families. And then I just was like, I'm no different than anybody else. Like I have to go through this time, and And so my amends process was in layers, and it was a really big curveball for me because we would do it driving. We would talk driving, like she'd be beside me, right? So it wasn't this intense eye contact. And we were getting into some pretty like the bottom line was coming up, which was like some of the stuff she'd have been exposed to in the marriage, and she was mad that I hadn't left when I should have, in her opinion. And she was being able to express herself safely, and I was hearing it and responding. And then I finally thought that I covered everything, and I said, "Is there anything else that I've missed and that I need to be aware of?" And she said, "Yeah, you haven't even talked about the whole thing that I'm mad about." And I was like, "What's that?" And I'm racking my brain for anything else, because by this point we had talked about what I thought was everything. And she said, "The lying. The lying was the thing that I was the most mad about, is how much you were lying. You'd be drinking and you'd say you weren't be drinking, and you'd be, there'd be cans hidden, and then I'd go to find them because I was going to show somebody and you already moved them, and there'd be there was just all this lying, and it was crazy making. It was just and she hated me for it because I was a hypocrite, and I'm glad I learned to ask, "Is there anything else?" Because I thought she was going to say no. And acknowledging that piece was a huge, huge part of it was finally she was accessible completely. And then she started to go through her own stuff. She got married and had a baby while she's been in Calgary. And that relationship has taught her a lot of compassion. And she said to me, she's like, I get it. I understand how it wasn't just about I got to leave, or I didn't believe him, or I didn't the things that I would say. She didn't understand because she was just, a teenager and a young kid. And so she's learning her own lessons. And then she's coming back and being like, "Okay, I get that kind of now." And her having her own baby. And so I guess a added bonus that I've had is that she is living with me now. We live together. We rented a house together, and yeah, we were excited to sign the lease again. We were like, should we do that? And it's we've played out in the real time environment all the shit that was the egg pan. I think I told you about the egg pan. She'd make eggs and it would sit in the sink and it would send me through the roof because it was old stuff that was coming up in real time, and being able to communicate Acadia, that stuff bothers me, and I feel just really disrespected, or that you're not caring about, what we talk about or however we talked about it. And then her responding back to me "Mom, sometimes you're just over the top, sometimes your expectations are really high," and learning how to compromise within that. And we would not have had that if we weren't living together. So I just think the playing field presented itself, and we are taking advantage of it. And there's been a lot of healing just as a result of that.
So a huge, huge part of this is organically allowing the amends to take its own shape over time, and having little micro conversations about different aspects of maybe the pains and the hurts, and sometimes not even talking about that, just talking about other things, right? But making the space to be able to have these conversations over time, using tact, common sense, your intuition, and knowing that maybe when you're ready, she's not ready. And being able to say, okay, because, I think a big thing that people do is they know there's something wrong. So the parent or the authoritative figure, or maybe even sometimes the kid, says, "We need to talk." Then they talk about whatever it is. And it's this deep conversation about a lot of things but it never really happens again. Nothing really gets resolved because it doesn't really work like that. These big conversations are important, but then they got to be followed up by many mini conversations to kind of massage whatever the big conversation was about. and hopefully the results are kind of coming through communication. Are you getting what you needed out of these conversations? Are you healing? Eventually got to the point like, what else did I do that maybe I missed? Well, we didn't even talk about why I'm so mad. You're lying, right? And like, this has been a thing with my kids, and it's not easy, right? It's not easy. And, I've gone through big ups and downs with trying to live the amends, and sometimes I'm so oblivious to what my daughter even wants, or my daughters, or people. And right now I'm going through some of that. And really what they want is they want my time, and they want these conversations. They want the micro conversations. And part of my amends is finally I'm able to make some money. So I want to spend some money on them and do certain things. And so they do want that too. But it's just really hard to fucking figure out what the path is sometimes, eh? But I think the path is at least mini micro conversations that are authentic, and they are about whatever the issues are, and they can't all be about issues either. They got to be some lighter conversations.
That's
too,
right. I always tell people, like, just working with parents and mental health and stuff, the best thing they can do, the thing that I would say kids notice first and foremost is the cell phone. And putting down the cell phone goes so far. Like, it's amazing how fast people notice that, especially little kids, like doing like therapy with little kids and stuff. That comes up so much. There's this video that they interview little kids, and they say, out of everybody in the whole world, who would you want to have supper with? And I used to run it in a parent group, and I guess I thought it was cute, but I didn't think that every kid would say that, So I did it with Maze, and I just thought to do it one day, and this was maybe, 3 or 4 months ago, and he was playing, and so I got out my phone, and I was going to send this. I sent it to Acadia, and I said, "Hey Maze, I'm like, if you could have supper with anyone in the whole world, who would you have supper with?" And we were playing with his figure toys, right? His superheroes. I thought for sure he was going to say Spider-Man. I said, it could be anybody. It could be any of these guys. It could be like, and he didn't even think very long. He was like, you, Daddy, and Acadia, and Jericho. And I was like blown away because he loves Spider-Man. And I was like, holy shit, I'm still more important than Spider-Man. And like, that's going to not be forever, So Maze has been a different experience because I'm like so present, and it goes so fast. Like, this year just went so fast, and I don't have them that, like, every year is like, a death of the year before. You never have that 4-year-old again. It's going to be someone more mature who lets go of your hand faster, and then you wish for those days. And I had a lot of regret with my kids. I was on my phone a lot, and actually had a letter after Grandma passed in a book tucked away, and it was like, Janine, get off your phone. So I was like, got that message from her while I was unpacking some of her stuff. And I used to be really, really bad on my phone when the kids were young. And so now, like, all I can give is my presence. And I don't want to have the regret that I do have, that I'm healing through, like, today with how I show up for them. But like I would say with Maze, it's been such a gift because I went through the ringer initially, but he's just such a light, and I had like a chance to do it properly, I guess, in my mind, and I did what I could back then, and I understand why I did those things, but like, to have an opportunity to do different is a whole other thing. So I take it pretty seriously now because, man, time goes by so fast. But it doesn't take long to turn it around, right? Like, we go back to what it says in the book, where it gives these examples of people who were near death and then a year later unrecognizable. And it feels like forever when it comes to healing the family. It feels like, fuck, this is never getting better. And like, I have a couple girls that we went through the steps together, and I just pushed that. And I think that there's, like, step 12 is so important, of course. And I needed that to, like, really ground me. And that's where my life was at the beginning. But as a person's life gets busier, it's like there is a temptation to skip the family and to just go right into, sponsoring and to being of service and in my opinion, it's like you're skipping the whole thing. Like you have to do like one person, one family, one community. And if you're skipping over, it's like, well, why do you want to be so busy? And like when I was doing the busy thing in my life, it's because when I was at home, I felt the feelings of not being there, and it felt uncomfortable, or that I was failing, or that I just knew that I wasn't who everyone else thought I was at work, and I wasn't I didn't get the same validation or the hip hip hoorays when I was with my family, because I had to look people in the eyes, and Katie thought I was a liar, like I was looking at all my shit in real time, and nobody's telling me how good I am and how okay it is and good for you and hip hip hooray. And so to stand in your family and to stand in that presence is like, man, like it takes so much. And so I have to, sometimes people want to go into sponsor Never Never Land. And if you skip right over it, you're not going to have peace and serenity that this recovery can promise, because this is your people. And like, we're not meant to be disconnected from them. And when I'm like, I don't want to be close with my mom. I went through a phase like that. And it was like, of course I want to be close with my mom. I want to be able to like have a relationship with her. I don't want to spend the next however long like feeling all these things towards my mom. My like creator designed me to love the people around me, and that's the people. And like there's exceptions to this rule, like if it's toxic or unhealthy, but for the most part, I've learned a lot of things by just seeking to understand and changing my expectations. And so like now my relationship with my mom, when I was looking at her to be a certain way, or to support in a certain way, or to even understand in a certain way, I was always let down. And then when I like she's super fun and she's hilarious, and like she's spontaneous and like, ah. And so when I do those things with her, I have such a good time. And she's just, you go to your supports that are the right supports, like you. And so in working with others too, like I feel like I have a lot to offer when women are like the parenting thing, and that would be a reason that people would want to work with me, is because that's something that I'm good at like talking about, and that I actually think that my life reflects that. And that's like, if you are wanting that in your life, then you go to the people who, right? Like you go to the people who are doing that. And that's how that's another thing I've done in my recovery, is like, who's doing this that I can ask and get supported in the right way. And the family's no different. It's like, I don't go to certain people for the support, because it's not about me. And I have other supports, so I use the other supports so that I can be a strong member in my family. And like that seeking to understand, I can't stress that enough, because it just puts a person in a position to like really feel like going back to the very beginning of all this, when your parent is communicating with you and they're playing with you or buying you things or doing whatever else besides seeking to understand, then it may not come across as like the love that a person's trying to give when they're doing those things. Mm-hmm. And so like the thing that's done me the best is to put my phone down and to seek to understand, and to know that, the timing, I'm an addict, so I want it right now. And it's not right now. But there's so many lessons to be learned in the discomfort. And like, so just like anything else, I go into that discomfort with my mom, with my daughter, with my whoever, and I stand in it and I go like, okay, what is the lesson for me? Like, where am I needing to adjust my attitude so that I can be in love and connection here? And I've learned a lot that way, and it continues to be that way, and it's better results than what I was doing before, that's for sure.
Wow. There's a lot of good stuff. This has been a really, really good conversation. And I can tell because we're almost an hour and a half into it, and I could keep going about different things. But because we're an hour and a half into it, we are going to wrap it up. And I just want to say, like, you brought a lot of awesome insight. And, you know, we will do what was done to us in many cases, regardless of what we want to do. We are, creatures of repeating the same things that we learn. And, lucky for you, you had a good education that really helped steer you in a new direction. Mm-hmm. Because as we looked at your childhood and how you were raised and blah, 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 that could have easily transmitted into like how you were raising, and it was. But then you had this information and knowledge come in. And, in some ways, thank God you're an alcoholic and an addict. You got to really implement like 12-step strategy, use intuition and God along with your education. And like, coming out of this at still a fairly young age, in good shape and being able to teach your kids through your own actions so that they can maybe not repeat some of the things that we don't want them to repeat, right? But also accepting that they're on their own journey too, right? So, yeah, it's been pretty awesome and made me think a lot about my life. And I got to learn a lot about you. As good as I know you, I got to know you a lot better today. I don't know if you have any like final messages for, a mom or parents in recovery that have maybe seemingly fucked up their lives, or they feeling guilty about fucking up their kids' lives. Because I think a lot of parents think they fucked up their kids, and there's a lot of guilt and shame, and they don't know how to really come out of it, but they're trying to be better and do better, and they are trying to stay sober. You got any messages for anyone? Who would you give a message to?
Mm-hmm. That's the parenting guilt thing. I'd say that's universal, and then it's compounded infinitely for an alcoholic or an addict. That there's many things that go into how a person turns out, and like the parenting is the start of some things, but at some point a person has to kind of make their decisions. So I would say to not get wrapped up in the guilt, and to like really ground yourself in the reality that these things take time, and it's not too late to do better. And sometimes the conflict remains, and how can you stand in that, and what do you need to learn? Bringing in outside resources can be helpful too. Learning like parenting stuff. There's good parenting hubs in Calgary. But ultimately, like, you can turn things around, whether the child receives that or not. It's not about the outcome. When you have an interaction with somebody, if you do the best that you can in that interaction, and I mean coming at it with truth and love, if the person receives it or not, and your intentions was truly like truth and love, and not to alleviate your own guilt or anything like that, but you show up like that, truth and love, and how the people around you receive that, they're on their own path too. And when we're in hell, we can make hell hotter, or we can, stand in it in a way that's a bit more comfortable. And I don't know, I go back to the time and the seeking to understand, and lots is revealed through that. And I'll reach out if you feel like you're alone. Reach out to somebody who has something you want in this area. And if you don't know anybody, then reach out to the community, because Calgary has some really good resources.
Okay. On that note, I will say thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to re-listening to this when it's released. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I love you, Bill.
Love you too, Janine.